Hello and welcome back to the latest instalment in my course on music theory for electronic musicians. So in the last chapter we looked all about keys and scales, so hopefully if you're following this course through you kind of know the basics of keys and scales. What we're going to look at in this video are some devices, assistants and things that are available to us, specifically in Ableton Live, but there are similar things, as I understand, in other DAWs that are going to help you with your keys and scales. Just a quick reminder, there is a book in, I think it's in PDF format, whatever format it's in, that accompanies this, which you can get by supporting me on Patreon from tier 1 and above, so £1, $1, €1 a month. And you will get that book, which is a work in progress. There's new chapters being added to it every week or a few weeks, and I will keep that updated, and that'll be available obviously to all my Patreon supporters. And if you just want to support the channel, you can do so through Patreon. It's much appreciated. Massive shout out to all the current supporters on Patreon. I've had quite a few recently, and it is much appreciated, and it does help me keep the content coming and keep the channel going. So this one's called Keys and Scales Part 2. Scale devices and assistants. So I think in hardware and software, it's something I've noticed that's come along. I think Ableton Push was the first thing that I came across that basically showed you what notes were in which key and which scale to play, which I thought was a genius move when they first did that. And loads of hardware and software that does the same thing now. So obviously just mentioned Ableton Push, that has a scale feature on there. If we've got over here, you'll notice we've got the Deluge, which has a very similar sort of feature. If I turn the scale function off, I've not got this going through the audio interface, so you'll just kind of hear it in the background. But it just basically shows you where your root note is, like that. If we turn the scale feature on, and at the moment it's set to C major, it basically lights up all the notes for us in that scale. So the slightly darker lit pad is the root note, so that's C, and then we go to D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we get back to C, the next octave up. If we change the scale to E, I don't know, let's go E minor, okay, and now okay, it shows you which notes are in that key on that scale. So very, very useful stuff. Let's just move that bad boy out of the way. And I mean, I've got various other synths that will do the same thing, like the Uno synth does it, the Volcas now do it. Lots of things will do that for you and show you which notes are in the scale. I'm still a big believer in learning some of the theory behind it, because you don't want to always rely on having those devices available to you. But I think the two, knowing the theory and having those devices available does make you become a much better musician and songwriter, and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to look at one device and one feature of Ableton Live to start off with that's going to help you with your scales. And let's go over to the full screen on Ableton. And the first one is, amazingly enough, called the scale device. So at the moment I've got Ableton set up with, I've just got the grand piano on simpler. I'm actually playing that now from the, let's just go back again, sorry. So when I'm playing on the keys here, in fact I'll leave it on that screen for now because you need to see this. The sound is actually down on here. I'm doing this via USB, so it's playing the sound from Ableton, so you can hear that as and when we change stuff in the scale device. So the scale device is in MIDI effects, and it's down there. Now we've got all different scales and presets that we can load in here. I'm just going to load the basic thing in first. Okay, so we're going to stick it on here, and it comes before your whatever synth or whatever you've got in there. Now when you first look at it, it's like, what the hell's that all about? It's very confusing, I think. It's not the most user-friendly interface, but it kind of, if you play with it, it does sort of make sense. If you look across the bottom as I play through the notes on the keyboard, if I got the chromatic scale, okay, you can see these notes here. Again, I can't do it without looking. Okay, you'll see they light up. So basically what's happening is the incoming notes are coming in here, And then depending on how we have these blocks lit up, the outgoing notes kind of I know, go out that way, if you like. So if we go really extreme, and if I show you sort of what happens, is you can only have one of these blocks lit up vertically each time. Okay. So if I put everything on this bottom note, which is C, okay, any note I play on the keyboard is now going to come out as a C. Okay, so it gets rid of any notes that you don't want. Obviously, that's a bit extreme, but if you want a whole keyboard of Cs, that's the way you do it. So when it's the diagonal line going straight up, that is the chromatic scale. So over in the so let's now go back full screen on Ableton so you can see that a little better. Okay, so hopefully you can see as I'm playing there, we're just getting all Cs. So if we load in one of our presets that we've got in here, we're going to stick with the major scale. Okay, so we're just going to grab the major one, stick it in there. This now happens, which again is also quite confusing, I think. So we've set our bass note over here. Okay, so that's kind of like your root note. It would have been made more sense if they called it root, but anyway, it is on C. So we can see we've got these boxes are just now filling up the white notes, because obviously in C major we know all about C major. We've been doing it for weeks now. We know that C major is just all the white notes. So that means I can't play any notes that are out of key. Okay, so if I play, and again I've got to keep switching between these two cameras. If I play a C sharp, you can hear it's coming out as a C. Same thing with the D. So if I'm a bit sloppy with my playing, okay, we're going to just get notes that are in the key that we want. So that's one use of it. If you kind of want to sort of turn off notes that you don't want to do, that you don't want to play, and you accidentally press a C sharp instead of a C, that will sort that out for you. That will sort that problem out for you. So if we just, as an example, let's load up a different, let's go with minor harmonic, because we've looked at this before. Okay, so in the minor harmonic, you can see we've got a combination of white notes and black notes. And so on. So if you kind of look at the piano this way, if you have your bass note at C, it's kind of like the piano roll. So we've got C, excuse me, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, and so on. Okay, so that's the normal layout of the piano. If we go back to, in fact, so let's change the bass now to, let's go A. So we've now got A minor, if I can find it. In fact, it's probably easier just to type it in. He says, if his keyboard would work. Doesn't want to do it. There we go. We've got it on A. So you can see this now changes the grid. Hopefully this is sort of making sense in that C is now here. Okay, so we've got A sharp, B, C, and so on. So you've got to sort of look at your combination of white notes and black notes, working out where they all are. So if we start with the A, okay, so you can hear that if we try and play that A sharp, it's still coming out as an A. Okay, and so on. So just load in the scale that you want. And it's actually quite a nice way of just trying out different scales as well, particularly if you've got some MIDI notes in here. Let's just randomly put some amazing melody in here, which is going to sound awful. Okay, but if you wanted to hear what that sounds like in like different keys, okay, so that's G harmonic, minor harmonic. Okay, so now we can say, all right, what's a major pentatonic going to sound like? Okay, so if you can't decide what scale you want to do something in, just put some random notes in and say, okay, yeah, that's quite nice. I like that combination of notes. Okay, so that's quite another good useful use for the scale device. And I think, as with all of these things, the best way is just to kind of play around with it. It does make sense after a while. I remember the first few times I used it, it just confused the hell out of me. I really didn't understand it. But hopefully that little quick intro to it will give you an insight in the uses for this. We can also use it actually to work out what notes are in a particular scale. We looked at doing this in the piano roll in the last episode on this. If we go back to, let's go back to C major. Okay, so we've now got on here our sort of grid of our formula. Let's go full screen again on Ableton. We've got, our kind of formula of tones and semitones, which again we looked at last time. So the formula for the major scale is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So if we just light up all the white notes like this, that's going to give us that formula. If we now change that bass to, I don't know, do something random as an E, we can then see the notes that make up the scale of E major. And we can do the same thing with the minor scale. The best way to do that, again, is as we looked at last lesson, whatever you want to call it, is to go A minor, light up all the white notes, and then you can change that bass note and it will show you which notes are in your minor key. Now, there are the two kind of basic keys, major and minor. There are loads of others which we're going to cover in later episodes. So that's the scale device. A little bit confusing, but does have its uses. So something new that came out in Live 11, so I'm going to get rid of the scale device now because we don't need that now, is the kind of scale settings in the piano roll. You may have noticed if you've gone from Live 10 to Live 11 that we have a scale thing here and a scale thing here. Okay, so we're going to look at what they do. So at the moment I'm going to leave these random notes in because that's going to be quite useful to show you how this is working. So if we activate the scale function over here, okay, it turns on, you can see we get some of these lines are now a different color, and I think the color is based on the color of your clip, just here. And over here we can set the let me just check I'm on the full screen again. Yeah, and over here we can set which scale we want. Again, I'm going to stick with C major for now. So we can see on C major it's just lit up in the blue color all the notes, all the white notes, because we know by now that they are the notes in C major. So straight away we can see that, okay, that's not in the right key, that's not in the right key, so we can start to move those around a little bit and perhaps, get those in there. And again, we can try out different scales and move the notes around. Big difference between this and the other one, the scale device, is if I change that to D, it's not going to change the notes for me on the piano roll. It's only going to show me the different notes. Okay, so if you do want to sort of hear what those different scales sound like, you would want to use the scale device. And then over on here, we've got another button that says scale, which is kind of like the fold button. If you know the fold button, if you click on that, it gets rid of all the notes that you've not input into your MIDI clip. If we do the same thing with scale, it will get rid of all the notes that aren't in that scale. Now, if we do have a note that's not out of key, out of the scale, so I'm going to put that G sharp in there and do the same thing, you can see it kind of straight away. You can see that this note here is not in scale because it's sort of highlighted it as it's not coloured with all the others. So you can then think, okay, right, I need to move that, and now we're in the nice, lovely, happy C major scale. So if we unfold that and fold it again, you can see it's now all okay. So as we said, I mean, they both have their uses. This won't stop you playing notes that aren't in the correct key or the correct scale, but it's a very good visual guide. If you're just putting, I mean, I use this if I'm just putting notes in and I'm not playing anything in from the keyboard or whatever. I'll just use that really to see which notes are in the scale. So let's say I'm going to randomly pick a song and I'm going to do it in E Dorian. I can then see, right, these are the notes in the scale, and actually they're all in the right scale. So there we go, that would work. But I can see that I wouldn't want to use that note, and then we can start to build our tracks around that. So that's the scale function in the piano roll editor. One last thing I wanted to just show you is, again, it's another thing that Ableton do. I'm going to switch over to the browser, and it's this thing here. Which is called, if you go to this website here, I'll put a link to this in the description. It's learningmusic.ableton.com, and this is a great little I guess you could call it an app. It works on anything. It works on any browser, on a phone, on absolutely anything. On iPads, it's not a specific kind of thing, and it's really good for getting you started with various different aspects of songwriting, But there's a really great section on keys and scales. It starts off with this thing here where you've got some loops and stuff that you can play with. Okay, just to get you started on stuff. Okay, which is a great bit of fun. And then it goes through all these different sections. You've got a bit on beats, notes and scales we're going to come back to. There's bits on chords, bass lines, melodies, song structure, and all of that kind of stuff. Just to give you a quick example, if we go on the beats, there's some examples of songs and things here. And then you can start to build your own beats in something like this. And then if you want to take that into live, you can just click export to live and it will export it out as an Ableton Live project, which is very cool. So if we just look at the notes and scales section, I'll just briefly talk through the sections on here. There's a little bit here about pitch. You can drag on here. I mean, it's going right through the basics of stuff. It talks about specific notes. And then we can start to make some patterns with pitch just by putting some notes in here. We can drag notes out, we can make them longer and shorter. Okay, and this is all free, which is always great. And then we get onto the keys and scales section, which is kind of a bit more relevant to what we're doing now. So it talks about major scales. We can see the C major scale there, and you've got notes that you can play with in the C major scale. Then it talks through minor scales. Obviously, you can read through all this at your leisure. An example of the C minor scale and the notes that go in there. And then we talk a little bit about sharps and flats, chromatic scales and that kind of thing. So we can see we've got all those in there. And then there's a section at the end which is quite cool to play with notes and scales. So we can just, this is a little bit like the scale device, I guess. That, if I make a random melody, and then we can start to mess about with, hear what it sounds like in different keys. And also, if you want just a quick way of looking at which notes are in which key, you can just select it here and it shows you there. Again, this layout here is very similar to the layout on Push. And you've then got an option of putting some beats with that. And these will all play together in time. Let's get it a bit faster. Okay, so you can just start to experiment with different things here, but very useful bit of basic information about keys and scales, which is the kind of thing we've been looking at over the last couple of sessions. And like I say, there's chords. So I'll probably keep referring back to this that app, for want of a better description, as we progress through this course, because it is really useful. They do a really good one on synthesis as well, which I think is called learningsynths.ableton.com. If I remember rightly. So it's worth checking that out. Like I say, I'll link to that in the description. I'll also link the playlist for all these music theory videos, also the description, because if you've missed the previous one on keys and scales, I would suggest you perhaps go and watch that before you fully get into this, if you've not seen it, even though you probably already watched all this video anyway. But whatever. So, usual things. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button so you get notifications when I upload more of these. Check my music out. It's on Spotify, all those places. And if you're feeling generous, then please feel free to head over to Patreon and give me a bit of love and support on there. And that's going to help me keep the videos coming. If you've got any questions, any comments, stick them in the box below. Like I say, give us a thumbs up if you like what I'm doing. If I don't, then go away. I say this every time. But anyway, yeah, if you don't like what I'm doing, just don't watch it. That's the simple thing. And yeah, thanks for watching. And we'll see you in the next one where we're going to be covering intervals, octaves, and all that kind of nonsense. So I'll see you in that one. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.